All right, we good? Good evening, everyone. It is 5:00 p.m., May 21st, 2024. We are at 100 Polk Avenue in Cape Canaveral, Florida, at our City Hall Council Chambers for the City of Cape Canaveral Community Redevelopment Agency, CRA, Special Board Meeting. I call this meeting to order. And with that, Mr. City Manager, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Board Member Jackson.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Kellum.
Here.
Chairperson Morrison.
Here.
Board Member Willis.
Here.
Vice Chair and board members, thank you all for being here at our CRA meeting and supporting staff and the public. We appreciate you. This is public participation portion of the meeting. If you are attending online or here physically present, would like to speak, now is the time to please come forward. If anybody would like to speak, I don't see any hands raised, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none and seeing nothing raised online, we'll go ahead and close public participation. Bring it back to this board for new business. We have 3 items tonight, with item 3 being 2 parts, A and B. The first item is to approve the minutes for the March 19th, 2024 regular board meeting. Mr. Todd, or anyone, any comments on this?
I do not have any comments on the minutes, no, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 19th regular board meeting.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Kellum, second by Board Member Willis, to approve the minutes for the March 19th, 2024 regular board meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Board Member Davis.
4.
Board Member Jackson.
4.
Vice Chair Kellum.
4.
Chair Morrison.
4.
Board Member Willis.
4.
Item 1 passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 2 is to consider Business and Economic Development, BED, Board recommendations on prioritized use of available funds for redevelopment activities in the fiscal year 2024-25 and future. Okay, so I guess our CRA registered agent, Mr. Todd Morley.
Yes, sir.
The proper word. Is there any comments on this?
I'd be glad to step you through this very quickly, if I
Thank
may.
you.
On March 19th, the CRA board did make a motion and approved a motion for having our Business and Economic Development Board make some recommendations, as they're now authorized to do by code change the council approved. And then on April 11th, April 11th, they did discuss it. Dave Dickey was staff support there that night, and what he provided to them were 3 background pieces of information. The ordinance 030323, which establishes their authority to provide recommendations on CRA funding. Also, the fiscal year 24-25 CRA proposed budgets and CIP. All of this is included tonight as well. And lastly, they looked at a 3-part document, which was called the CRA Debt Memo from September 15th, 2023, SGR's Revision Cape Canaveral Report from June 22, and lastly, the CRA Fiscal Year 22-23 Annual Report. So after chewing on all that, city finance staff provided an overview of the budget. They discussed the debt service payments that the CRA currently has. Chiefly the community center and the Cape Center were pledged CRA revenues for a note to have those constructed. Then the projects within the current fiscal year were discussed with the board, also the draft fiscal year coming up. And there's two projects that are being considered as the heavy projects for the CRA right now. And one is, by far the biggest one, is the presidential streets, but also the Civic Hub project. So they discussed those projects and how the CRA is scheduled to be the main funding mechanism for both of those projects and how that could be done. Basically, there's two ways you could do it. You could go cash forward every year, or you could do a note and pledge revenue from the CRA like we did for the other two projects. The board discussed the use of these funds for these projects, also that cities and enterprise funds could be tied in. And the reason that was discussed was because, like, the presidential streets is not fully all of it within the CRA. I'm going to say maybe 80% of it is in the CRA. The other 20% is outside of the CRA. But so the CRA couldn't pay for that other 20%, but enterprise funds could be used to help bolster that shortfall, whatever it may be. The board felt that, I'm going to the next page, yep, thank you, Mia. The board felt the priorities were somewhat already determined. They did mention that they wanted to advocate for the business community in upcoming CRA budgets. They mentioned that the CRA could have a possible role in funding improvements to the appearance of State Road A1A. And then they ended by saying the board unanimously recommended the concept of bonding CRA funds to reach a more constructive and impactful result for future CRA projects. Mayor.
Thank you very much, council. Any questions for staff or comments on this one? I got a few things I wanted to discuss, but if you don't mind, I'd like to go. Yes, Vice Chair Kellum.
Yes, I thought I watched the meeting a couple times and thought it was very interesting and what they had to talk about and recommend. I would like to see maybe next year in the budget process, not to ask them to opine on what they think we should spend money on when we have already given them the things we are spending money on. So they really didn't have a choice on, critical needs or whatever. But, and I thought that it was very interesting, the discussion they had on bonding and how we could do that for financing a lump sum. I'm not sure I understand everything that there is to understand to make a decision like that. But I think that as a council, if we had more information on how the bonding works and what the pros and cons are on, getting a loan like we did or bonding like we could in the future, would help us in the process of budgeting as well. Also, I thought it was interesting what Mrs. Mays was saying about, there's really nothing in our CRA budget that is business-oriented. And we've talked about that before, we need to build the tax base, but we're not spending any money in the CRA on enhancing properties to bring businesses here, which I think would help down the road. And also the CRAs can go away. And the bonding process, they couldn't touch the CRA if it was bonded. So that's a definite positive thing. But I think that, focusing on commercial property and commercial businesses, I know at that meeting, Mr. Dickey brought up buying property and doing whatever we have to do to demo it, make it available to the developers. I think that's a really important part of our CRA too. Just to fund other projects that will bring businesses, attract businesses to our city for what the residents are looking for as far as restaurants, shops, whatever. But I did have one question in the budget, fiscal annual budget. There is $51,000 for the splash pad maintenance. For the life of me, in 163, I can't find it anywhere where it says we can finance a splash pad. So I looked through it, read through it, looked at other cities, and the only thing I could find was one city said, you have to be careful of general government operating expense that are unrelated to the planning and carrying out of community redevelopment plan. The splash pad is not in our community redevelopment plan. And I think when we finance that through the CRA, is it taking away from the actual operating expense that we need to see as a council when we're making a budget? You know, how much is the community, the C5, the splash pad, the C5, the playground? What are the operating expenses on that every year? We need a big picture. So that was my comments on that. I'm really happy that we have the bed board. They seem to be really focusing on what we're asking them for, and I'm happy that we're going to redevelop our plan or redo our plan coming up. So that was my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Board?
Yes.
Member Willis. Yes, sir.
I had a question about the splash pad maintenance coordinator, because that sounds like a staff position.
We currently outsource that.
Okay, so it is a staff position.
No, it's outsourced, and we're proposing it remain to outsource.
Why are we calling it coordinator?
Molly's not here, is she? Do you have an answer on that?
The only thing I could lend to that would be I don't know where we'd have to ask Molly where the word coordinator came from, but we do know that there's a guy that runs that business, and this is who we're doing business with this past year or whatever. It would have thought it would be just called maybe, the maintenance contract for the splash pad. But I'm not sure where the word coordinator come from, but I'm sure Molly could tell us why that terminology was used. But that would lead it to believe that, yes, that was like somebody on our staff. But what needs to be done with the splash pad definitely requires the expertise of somebody, some company or whatever that has the wherewithal, and of course it's like taking care of a gigantic pool, if you
Right.
will, because all the chemicals and all the electronics and all the other stuff. But so, not to be confused though with a staff member. Okay, it's definitely a company. And we did look at 3 companies, and Molly could tell you the disparity between the 3 companies to look at this particular company was far below any of the other ones. So that's all I have to say.
I might add, Mr. Chair, that's a good question for the CIP meeting this Thursday to clarify that point.
Okay. The other issue I had was the recommendation on A1A improvements. Because if we're doing that through the CRA, doesn't that money have to be spent immediately?
The money has to be spent that year or obligated that year. I don't, this may be a question for the city attorney, but saving money for a project down to just banking money for some future year, I'm not sure that's.
Because we would be somewhat restricted on what we do with A1A.
Yeah.
And I've become painfully aware over the last 2.5 years, FDOT doesn't do anything quickly.
Yep.
So,
But I think you're just not allowed to just bank CRA money
Right,
year after
right,
year after year.
right.
That's a no-no
yeah.
for any purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Davis?
No, mine was answered. I was concerned about A1A and putting money into A1A CRA. If in fact, when FDOT decides to do Canaveral, we'd be putting money in and spending money on it, but taking it out.
Well, the current money, if we're talking about the replenishment for A1A, the council approved for $24,000 for the next 10 years. Well, that money is being expensed out of the non-departmental portion, the general fund, and it's being put into SPIA, right, our investment fund, so it's getting a little bit of interest. And then, that was the vision of council, and then when we decide to use it, in the next 10 years or whatever, but council had approved $24,000 for 10 years.
And we've been doing that.
And we've been doing that, but I don't know at what point that will actually do that work, but we know we'll have $240,000 after 10 years that's sitting in the SPIA account. It's not sitting in the CRA, so it's not, there's no worries about, if we don't use it.
And it wasn't sourced into CRA.
No, it wasn't sourced in the CRA. It never was sourced in the CRA.
Right, but my concern is expending the energy, the thought process of trying to take CRA money and apply it to A1A, and I don't think that's going to work out for us.
Do you think they were talking about the road itself or the businesses along A1A? I think that's what they were referring to, the bed board.
I wasn't sure. I mean, it could be anything from crosswalks, because I thought about the same thing. What are they actually referring to?
They're saying appearance of State Road A1A.
Well,
It could be businesses, it could be.
I believe they said,
landscape.
when you drive through on A1A and you see the closed-up businesses and boarded-up businesses and all that is a first impression for a lot of people. And I think they're concerned about how A1A looks, not the road itself, but the businesses on the sides.
Yeah, because to date, there is no even $1 in our budget any place in the CRA that has to, do with A1A. We haven't even come to that point yet, so, yeah.
Mr. Chair, if we could hear from Mr. Dickey, because he was there that night at the board meeting, and maybe he could add some clarity to this point.
Absolutely. CRA Director Dick?
Thank you. I'm going to give a very politically correct statement and say you're both right. I think the discussion was correct, as Mickey's describing, is that there is a concern about folks who, they want to spend some money on the main thoroughfare through the city because that's where most of our visitors are. That's their experience with Cape Canaveral is on A1A. So the road, the experience on A1A was very important to them, to notably the businesses along A1A. However, I think how that's applied is what can the CRA do to encourage new businesses to be located along A1A. And we really didn't get into the nuts and bolts of that, but my impression is we were talking about capital improvements to do the CRA's part in improving that experience. Now, again, we didn't get into what that is, if that's a streetscape, if that's crosswalks, if that's, we didn't get that far, but my impression is I think you're both onto something there. Yes.
Well, what was the program you were talking about, Dave? It was, you referred to it as an assemblage?
Assemblage, yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's when you buy property and demolish it or whatever it needs
Yes.
to attract business.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying and I think that's what they were leading to for.
Yeah, I think there certainly is opportunity for the CRA to get involved in if that's what the CRA board would like, that there's certainly an opportunity and a need for that. It can be expensive because we're talking about commercial real estate, very high valued commercial real estate. So it's not going to be inexpensive to take on an assemblage projects, but there certainly is if the CRA board wishes, there's certainly a demand for it and a need for it.
And as the vice chair indicated, we can't tell a private property owner who to sell their property to. If we say we want a Trader Joe's, you can only sell that property to Trader Joe's. We can't do that. But if the city owns the property, the city can decide who they're going to sell to, certainly, and direct that sale or market that property to those businesses that we've identified, and we could restrict it to that. That would be a good way to do that.
And for the vice chair, you're correct in what they talked in the bed board about the businesses, and they needed more business-driven things in the CRA or whatever. And then during a meeting and after a meeting, they felt like and it's written here, they felt like their hands were kind of tied for this next year because they said, well, geez, all your projects have been prioritized and they do consume
been
all the
baked.
dollars. What?
Have been baked. That was the word
Baked.
they used.
Yeah,
Baked.
and so, but what the future would hold is exactly what you're
Yes.
talking about. How do we get there and do that?
And
So,
the point that they brought, I thought was interesting, is too, that they said, you can have beautiful residential streets,
Yeah.
and when your main thoroughfare looks terrible.
Right.
yeah,
You know.
exactly, that's what they said.
Most of our visitors don't experience our residential neighborhoods.
Right.
What their experience is A1A.
I mean, we have to be able to find a happy medium between what we need for the residents and what we need for
Yeah,
a
I think,
tax base.
yeah, I think that's what Chairperson Mays was really trying to get to during her discussion.
Okay, this is good conversation. I think Council, or Board Member Davis, it was your question that kind of evolved into that, but. Okay, Board Member Jackson.
Well, mine is probably going to be popular, but we've discussed it before in prior meetings on council and on the CRI board. And I understand we had a situation that created the flooding on Lincoln this weekend. And we also had discussed the fact that really, until the tidal valve's installed, we really don't know what kind of impact that's going to give us. So we don't know the impact really yet of what we will have with the storage tanks under the Civic Hub area. And I know that we have a plan to start one street in that Presidential Street area. And I know the original Kimley Horn report had that the pavement on that has been allowed over the years, for many, many years, has caused the situation where we have flooding in those presidential streets. So I have huge concerns for those presidential streets and the flooding. I'm anxiously awaiting the tidal valve because I'm really hoping that that takes care of the issue. I have such a hard time as a new councilwoman sitting and looking too far forward with these budgets and things when we have those things that we don't know what kind of impact we'll have yet. And so it makes it very difficult, in my opinion, to plan for some of the things that are not, that we don't know the answers to yet. So, but it would be my desire in whatever way we could do this, and I'm not the expert on this, I'm new, as I've said, but I would just love it if we could do more than one presidential street to start with, because I think that would have an impact on the flooding, but of course, we won't know that until we get the tidal valve installed. Do we have a date on the tidal valve installation yet?
Tim's not here, but I recall he told me it was at 3 months, so they just started, so this is May, that'd be August.
So that's tough. That's a tough timeline because that's right in the middle of storm season.
Yep.
And we're already having downpours with a lot of rain in a short period of time. So it's really hard for me as a person on this board to look at all of these things way in the future until we get this under control. It's concerning to me for reasons of property loss and cost to the city as well as the residents and that kind of thing. Although I think a lot of these projects that we have in here and some of the things that I've seen are wonderful. I think they're great, and then I think that people would appreciate them. My priorities for me as someone on this board and also on council is to get the other under control. So it makes it hard for me to look at the budget and not want to pull things out and move it over to see if we can get more impact in the beginning on this and put something on the back burner, not saying scrap it, but push it back further on the date if we don't know the impact. So that's and I've noted several things in the budget that look like we could maybe push them on the back burner till we know the answer to this. But we won't know the answer until the budget's already done. So That makes it much more difficult.
Yes. It does. Board Member Jackson, I assumed you were
Yes.
wrapping up. Anything else from the board? I got a few comments, but
Well, I would just like to make a couple comments about pushing things off. As we witnessed this past weekend, mechanical systems can and will fail. So that assisted in the flooding when the current system or the temporary system failed. That's not to say that the tidal valve in that system might fail. It's mechanical, it's subject to fail. So anytime we can put a passive system in place that is working 24/7, whether the power's on or not, it'll always be there to assist. So we have to be careful that we don't push these things off, because we are in a situation today because of decisions that were made 10 or 20 years ago. And if we don't make a decision for tomorrow, for the future, if we're only making a decision based upon the absolute necessity for today, then tomorrow we're going to be in the same problem. So we have to look to the future, regardless of how hard that might be. We have to plan for the future. And things will always be more developed, possibly worse. Who knows? We can't control how fast the rain falls, but we can control where it goes.
Absolutely, and I'm not in disagreement with you on that, Council, or Board Member Willis. I do want to say this, though. The report stated there's too much concrete on those presidential streets. They cannot drain. Tidal valve or no, it identified that as one of the issues. We also know that right now we have storage tanks under City Hall. We don't know how much is held in those storage tanks when we have a rain event. So to me, I'm looking at what the experts have provided and what can we do quickest for the quickest relief for that area, not saying don't plan for the other. That's why I was saying back burner. But the report absolutely mentions the pavement in concrete and pavement on the presidential streets as causing part of this issue. There's no way for it to drain. So I'm not in disagreement with the storage tanks at all. I'm talking about potentially prioritizing what will have the quickest impact for the area, and hopefully along with the tidal valve when it's working, and hopefully it works well. But the report absolutely stated that the flooding issues in those presidential streets were from the pavement.
Well,
the
that-
report that which one, was that the engineer report?
Yes.
There was a few, do you remember the title of it? Which
No,
one?
but I can.
Mead
Mead and
Hunt,
Hunt one?
Mead
Yeah.
Hunt one.
Okay. just
But the
make-
Mead and Hunt one also said, any place that we can find additional storage of water, we should do.
Right, and that's why.
And it's going to take longer to replace the concrete and asphalt on these streets than it will to immediately or within the next year try to get storage. Not that I certainly agree with moving as quickly on the presidential streets as we possibly can, because I don't want to look at anybody and tell them, well, we pushed it off and your place flooded. But we have to find the quickest solution that gives us the biggest bang.
And we're going to get into, I think, the Fillmore Avenue one. I think for this one, this is good dialogue, conversation about really item number 2, consider Business and Economic Development Board recommendations on prioritized use of available funds. Just to clarify here, the action or the new business here is, do you need something specific from us as far as a motion or consensus on?
No, sir. I think the bed board was properly used as a resource for the CRA board and can continue to be used as a resource as the CRA board needs them to weigh in on things. But I think they give us some good input here and some things to think about as we make future decisions, as the board makes those decisions.
Well, thank you, because I think this is an agenda item that we're receiving and considering. I did appreciate the CRA board. My comments, just to, I guess, round it off here, and we can obviously talk more if needed, but I was there. I went to the bed board meeting. I had the opportunity to sit in, and we are lucky to have all of our boards. And this is one where, I think different than some of the other boards is they're very active in the community in regards to economic development. I mean, very specific. Some of them are in a part of the equation to define successful economic development. And as many of us are, as homeowners, property owners residing. So I don't think we'd ever done that before, taking advantage of the opportunity to the board. I don't remember how it was recommended, but I did appreciate that. I had a chance to talk with our city manager about the statement about predetermined. I just, going back, I think we just approved the minutes. Our request was, as I intended, I can at least speak for myself, was take the available funds that we have and take a look at the projects we are proposing for those and have that board recommend yes, no, whatever. We didn't really define how they would. We didn't ask them to rank them or anything like that. And some of the dialogue from, as chair and as a board member here, to our directors who were there at the time was the statement that these were already baked in or predetermined. That is not how I felt at all. I think I was willing to do some of the things we're talking about here today, as board member Jackson, and prioritizing Fillmore. And my hope is whenever they meet again, I don't think anything needs to be done between now and as we actually take steps for the budget, is that they could have another opportunity to add in and or remove, because I think they were given the message that our minds were sort of made up and this was the way. And so they didn't, I think, bring a lot of new ideas. And as far as the bond idea, I believe that was recommended by us to them. That did not come about from that board. And when I read through here, it seems like the board came to that conclusion. They weighed in on the bonding, but it's important, I think, to state that we are recommending this because that really helps me know there's a reason we recommended it. And there could be some good reasons. And so I would like to talk about, I think we've used loans in the past, bonds. I don't think we've been in a bond since I've been on board here.
Commercial loans and SRF.
And so understanding, I think some of those things, as Vice Chair Calumet brought up, would be really important. And I think we naturally would. But as far as taking on any type of debt, whether it be a bond or a loan, my position has always been that I do not mind taking on debt as long as it's for a well-defined priority that's really widely agreed upon in the community. And I think flooding, i.e. Fillmore Avenue, Johnson, we're already doing that. But if we're going to go, we have to look at the whole budget, because you might borrow for an essential, but then you're spending on things that are not highest priority. And just a couple of comments about the Mead and Hunt study. Yes, I think they did say anywhere else that you can find stormwater, do it, but we have to draw the line somewhere. I mean, are we saying that if we can find stormwater up on the north side of the city, it's going to provide impact to Fillmore Avenue. I bet in engineers, there is maybe a couple tablespoons it would offset, or nothing in all seriousness is going to. And so where I am trying to draw the line is to get as close to those properties in proximity if that has the highest impact, or as we're doing on the Center Street, maybe it's double down and really expand those pipes out there and take those. But once we start getting out of that area, yes, it'll provide an impact, but if that money can be used to have a greater return by getting closer in proximity to those properties, that's just an example of how I'm going to be thinking through it. And I hope that we can come to some strong conclusions that says, yes, for these reasons, right? It's Civic Hub or whatever project is in front of us is going to be positive impact, but it's not as good, right, as this other alternative. And I had a chance to get down to the site and take a look at that. And I look forward to getting into agenda item number 3B, I think, as we can talk more about it. But as far as considering it, I appreciated the board's involvement. Thank you to city staff. I just wanted to clarify that, you know, if they do come back together again, and they did walk away saying, well, had they not had their minds made up, right, I would have recommended such. I'd want to know that, and I want them to know that they are heard and those were not baked in and already decided upon. We certainly talked about a few of them for a while, and I just think it was maybe miscommunication or misunderstanding, not even saying it was intended to be perceived that way.
Mayor, may I say a few words about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, yeah, I think during that meeting, what had transpired was that they had seen what's in our budget for discussion, $2.4 million, saying the CRA. And when they saw our budget and saw what we were going to spend, say, on the Civic Hub and the Presidential Street, they had looked at that and felt like maybe they were a little bit handcuffed because, in other words, they said, looks like for this year, your priorities are set because I'm looking at a budget as 2.4 million, and if you guys are going to pursue doing 18 presidential streets or whatever it is, then in the future, it's going to require a heck of a lot more revenue. And then there was an example put out there like, you know, because they asked me, they said, what has the city done in the past? I said, well, we did capital notes, but they were, you know, for 6.2 million, 5.5 million for these buildings and what have you. But as we went, we go forward, because of the volume, the size of this project, if the city decides, if council decides to take on this presidential street thing for the long term, then that's when they suggested that. And I remember us talking back and forth of a $25 million bond for, and don't quote me on this, but for 30 years. Okay, in other words, it's going to take a lot of money. And we don't know how much a presidential street will cost now, but I'm sure after we do our first one, we'll get a good idea. But so they were looking out. Tom Hermanson was sitting there. He's looking out saying, you know, if you're going to continue to do this, then obviously, if we got $25 million, it's going to have to be for 30 years because the city's revenue influx we couldn't make the payment in 10 years like we've been taking taking our low capital notes for 6 million, what have you. So it's looking on, like you said, the revenue is not available to do what we're trying to do for the long term. So it's just going to be, and just to play this in based on what you were saying, Mayor, is how do you address the flooding if you want to work on this stuff? And you got to remember you have a few $1 million to play with as you move along to then going to Board Member Willis to say like, okay, but we got to keep doing something here, moving the ball down the road. So we have to make sure we use these CRA funds. And could we collectively do what, like you said, Board Member Jackson, could we, do what you're saying, but still with the money that's left over, put it towards the presidential streets to further do that, because you only got a couple $1 million to play with because we don't have the bond yet. So I just want to put that in context. But in the greater sense, Mayor, yes, it'll take a heck of a lot more money to do these 18 presidential streets or whatever for the future. God knows what a presidential street will cost 8 years from now. You know what I'm saying? So,
Thank you.
okay, yeah.
I think those are, we have considered it. Is there anything else that we want to consider further or discuss in regards to this? Yes, Vice Chair Kellum.
Just another couple questions. I understand, the bond issue. Like I said, I don't know enough about it to make a decision, but to me, like if, just say, out of the sky numbers, $30 million. So what is the pros and cons with if we take $30 million and we obligate the CRA for the next whatever years, as opposed to taking small notes, obligating the CRA? This is what I think as a council, we need to know, what both sides of the story, so we can.
I'm sure you understand that issue, though.
They were saying that it would be another way to get a large lump of some money and pay for, like obligate the cost or whatever.
And they also characterized it, Anthony, as and Tom had said this, and I don't think it was necessarily true, by getting a bond, then it solidifies you that they can't do anything with the CRA. But I think in our agreement with the CRA, we're locked in until, 2040?
16 more years, yeah.
16 more years. Yeah,
No,
so,
it's twofold. One, the city has a limited duration on the CRA, in a local agreement with the county. The interlocal agreement, if I recall, limits the CRA's ability to pledge any CRA funds beyond the termination date. So any lending or borrowing that the CRA engages in must be paid prior to the termination, by the termination of the CRA. So bonding is nothing other than taking on indebtedness, taking on debt. CRA has taken on debt and has done some significant projects or participated with the city on projects. So I'm not sure it gives it the CRA any special immunities or insulation, by having indebtedness, because the CRA and the city already have the interlocal agreement with the county. So you have a finite life in which to borrow money and pay it back already.
I think it might help, if I could say, I think what you're getting at is, what kind of options do we have for future indebtedness? Like, if we have a revenue stream of $2 million per year, and we can project that being solid for the next 10 years, could we get a 10-year note, and how much would that note be?
Yeah, I just think as a councilor and myself, I would like to see different options on, obviously, we're going to have to take on debt to get these things done.
well, the 10-year note would depend on how much it is, and then based on the pledged revenues that let's just say for now, the general fund would be able to support, it would determine, we would have to see how much the city could afford to make payment each year on whatever that note is. So that, I could tell you, we're not going to get $20 million note for a short term, because the city doesn't have the revenue to pay it back.
But to find out what we could get.
Oh, yeah, well, exactly, and I've already,
Yeah, but John, I think what the board member may be getting at is, if there is a relatively large project that is a priority to the board, and the board may not have cash on hand, the board can leverage debt and to take on that project earlier, but the catch, of course, is the CRA would have to pledge future revenues.
right.
So it's a leverage opportunity for the right priority project, if that's what the CRA wants to do. But you're pledging future revenues to pay back the debt.
That's what.
And based on that intake,
Leverage there.
and based on that intake, and to continue on doing presidential streets, the only thing you may be able to fund, even with the loan, with the presidential streets, may be just presidential streets in the CRA. You may not be able to do much more within the CRA because there'll be no funds available, because you will consume the couple $1 million and based on whatever the loan is. And I just wanted to say, Todd, that I've already talked to the city's financial advisor, and when we decide to do this, there is a whole process, and we will meet, and we'll get all the specifics if we went down the bond road, and trust me, there'll be so much information there based on so many different scenarios. The council will look at A, B, C, D, E, and F and say, well, like, this is what we can do, but we can't do that. So that's all being looked at. I've already talked to, after that bed board meeting, Mayor, I already talked to Jeff Larson, and we're ready to, when it's time to discuss it, he'll get his team together and we'll give you the best information we could.
Well, that was my point.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll decide, okay, we're going to take on 3 streets at a time
Right.
at today's rate, I don't know, but I just would like to have other options.
Right. Yeah.
That we can look at. We can decide that, you're right, John, we're just going to get a note, but that was what I was looking.
It's a humongous project, though, 18 streets.
is a humongous
It's of course, it's over several years, so.
And then each year the CRA grows, right?
It does, and we'll have to see where the gross taxable value goes this year, if we're going to go another 11% up, which will help the CRA. If we go, I did an estimate, I don't know, I won't find out another 2 weeks on the estimate of the gross taxable value, but if it goes up 11%, the CRA could possibly have $3.2 million.
Thank you.
Between what the city gives and what the county gives. So I'm hoping.
That's what he said, 3.2.
Thank you. I think, Vice Chair Kellum, anything else? It's 5:46 PM, and we need to, I think, get through a couple more items. If there's not anything else.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I don't think we need to take any action. We can just move right on to the next agenda item. All good with that? Okay, so this is item number 3A, which is recommend the city council reallocate $150,000 originally allocated for selective demolition at the Civic Hub site to fund engineering design costs associated with the Civic Hub's master stormwater system and to approve said funding. So that's item 3A. And B is recommend the city council approve $300,000 for design and engineering for reconstruction of Fillmore Avenue. So these are both recommendations that I do believe you're looking for us to take action on.
Yes, sir.
And do you want us to consider these separately or together?
Separately is fine.
Okay, so let's take 3A first, and if you want to
Sure.
explain even both of them or whatever's best, but
Please. Yeah, both of these are currently in our budget for 23-24. A and B are already set aside in that budget in the CRA fund, CRA budget. The A is the $150,000, when it was put into the CRA budget, it was put in for selective demolition of certain things that we thought we're going to be taking these things out in preparation for the Civic Hub project. After the year of discussion that we've had, and we've had so much discussion about stormwater at the Civic Hub, I think it would be better to not spend that $150,000 on selective demolition and instead spend it on doing a stormwater design plan for the Civic Hub. This is a residual from the loan, John, correct?
Right,
That we
capital
used.
note 20.
So it needs to be used for the Civic Hub project.
Exactly, so it's staying the pot of money's staying right where it's supposed to, yeah.
So that's one recommendation that I would recommend we do with that, and just get that plan ready for when we do want to do that stormwater project. By the way, the CIP currently, in the approved budget, puts another, I think, $1,050,000 in stormwater at the Civic Hub for 24-25. And we've seen that roll through the CIP workshop too, and it'll be there again this Thursday. We can discuss that. So it's like, wow, we could get a plan now, and we could do some stormwater improvements at the Civic Hub next year, if that's what we wanted to do. But all this is saying, I don't think, in my opinion, we shouldn't be removing selective demolition items there. Instead, we should be focusing on the stormwater solution and put this money towards that plan. And want to stop there, Mr. Chair, or do you want me to go on to the second one?
I think if we're going to vote on that one separately, let's just go ahead and try to get through it. We got 10 minutes, so 5 minutes each. Board, any comments on this one? I have some, but I'll go last if there's anything.
I'm just curious how we are able to gauge any performance of the storage tanks in the other areas of the city. Do we have any way to do that?
So your question is to gauge what was that?
Do we have any ability to gauge how the storage tanks in the other areas of the city are performing for, retention during flooding?
I think we've got some intelligence at Canaveral City Park where we've done the exfiltration system there. And I'm not sure what the measurable metric, desirable metric would be, but I would think at least water that does not go off into that drainage basin, in other words, only stays in, if 100% of it stays in that exfiltration system, you get an A.
Right.
If, so much of it filled up and went outside, that brings your grade down a little bit. I think we can get some intelligence possibly out of that, and Tim, I would ask you to work with Zach on that. But for our other system, like City Hall, we mentioned we've got drains in this parking lot. We don't have any intelligence there at all. It's a certain design capacity. If it fills up, it goes into the basin. But maybe we could put some thought in towards putting some intelligence in. What does it take to measure that? How effective is it?
And I think that would be really good to know because this is in this same general area and it may be helping flooding down near Ridgewood and we're not aware of it. So I think that's good intelligence to have.
Let's make a note there, Tim, to look into that.
That's
Thank you.
great.
Good idea.
I think that's good info to help make this decision. I think one step further. Board, any other comments on this one?
I have just
Vice Chair
a
Kellum.
question.
Mhm.
So the 150,000, is that going to be, on this map that shows the master plan, and it's the purple East Basin Underground, is that going to be enough for the whole design of all of this, 150,000?
Kimley Horn has told me they would comfortably fit underneath that number.
Okay. And that would be all these places where they say they can store water?
All the shaded eligible areas, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask, we're saying that we would like statistics and stuff on the quality or how these tanks are working. Have we had any problems in the past with any of the tanks?
No,
Okay, thank you.
not that I'm aware of.
I think it's two things. How they're working is good, but how effective are they is the second one? So they might be well-maintained, they might be in good standing. That's the status of the mechanical wear and tear. That's awesome. But I think anything on performance is really important so that we can rinse and repeat and go and do another one. And that's interesting info. So, Board Member Willis?
I think anything that we can remove upstream reduces the demand on what happens downstream. It makes what happens downstream more effective. So I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you. My question is that I think it was stated that we must use these funds in the same project. Between now and the next time we meet, I'd like to see what the to verify what the procedure would be to allocate funds outside of that area. Because that's a big, if we are rock solid and know that's the case and there's no ways out, okay. But if we can go one block downstream closer to where the problems exist, and it's going to give a better return. It's just another example. But if we are required to spend within that jurisdiction, My comments are absolutely, stormwater seems like a really logical thing to do. But I think I would want to verify that, because if those funds are available, I think we should know that is an option to consider. So those were my comments. It's really hard to make decisions, and my final comment is these are one-off, like, capital improvement projects or it's funding the budget. I really we're going to be meeting on Thursday. And so I'd really like to look at this with the whole picture. But this is important, and I'm glad we're talking about it as a CRA opportunity. And the answer, as far as spending money there, yes. I'm just not, I want to understand, are we limited just to spend the money there? Obviously, the money needs to be spent in the CRA, but in the Fillmore section, or the Civic Hub jurisdiction, as Vice Chair recommended.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
No, that was it?
No, so you're suggesting that we use the money but elsewhere besides the Civic Hub?
The statement was made that we have to spend the money here. That was the premise. That was
Right.
what we're operating on.
I'm just trying to-
I'm saying, I want to verify that that's true.
But we have a study from Kimberly Horn that indicates that Fillmore would be the appropriate place to do it with the best benefit. So why would we go spend money to check another location and stuff like that when we already have information?
Do we have the image up, or if we go to, right there. So that's not all of Fillmore. That's one block of Fillmore. I agree, Fillmore. But did their study say that this, in $150,000 on this part of Fillmore is going to provide a better return than the 200, 300, 400 block?
And Lincoln, when the flood happened this weekend, that's on the other side of Fillmore. So
Yes.
that's actually going away from the Civic Hub, and that's where we saw that manifest from the mechanical issue that we had.
Yes, Orange and Fillmore is where I was this weekend, and I can tell you I think that's I'm not saying no to Fillmore, it's just, this doesn't involve all of Fillmore. And I agree with Board Member Willis on that. It certainly seems to be upstream, and that makes sense, but that's it. I think we need to move on to the next item. I don't think we have to take any action on this tonight.
You don't have to, no, sir.
If they're all okay, we can wrap up with the final item 3B here. Okay, so this is recommend the city council approve the $300,000 for the design and engineering for reconstruction of Fillmore. Do we have what Fillmore is? That's my one question. Or is this going to tell us which part of Fillmore? Like what is, when we say reconstruction of Fillmore Avenue, what is Fillmore Avenue? What does that mean?
Yes, sir. The Kimberly Horn presentation at the April council meeting presented a lot of things, including the presidential master streets, including the Civic Hub, the one-way study, the various contingent studies that were done. And Kimberly Horn made a recommendation that we should start with Fillmore first. And the reasons for that are partly because it's definitely in the Center Street Basin. It's one of those streets that's been challenged, but also because it also runs right up alongside the Civic Hub. And designing both of those together may very well bring some efficiencies that they could share. So they recommended that we start, if we're going to start with one street, start with Fillmore. And we have $300,000 in the CRA budget, and it's just, for this year, it's currently there, and it just says presidential streets with no other specificity. So we can specify, at this point, the board can specify, do we want to target that towards Fillmore, as Kimberly Horn is suggesting, or do we want to target that towards another presidential street effort in a different location? And my recommendation is we do follow Kimberly Horn's recommendation and target it for design fees for Fillmore. So that would be the reconstruction of Fillmore, whatever it takes. This first street that we do, we know we're going to take our lumps on it because we're going to dig up things that haven't been dug up for 60 years. We're going to find old pipe, broken pipe. We're going to find things that we didn't know were directional board underneath there. We're going to find illegal connections. We're going to find, who knows what we're going to find. And I think it's wise to do just one street now, take our lumps on it, rather than try to do multiple streets and say, oh my gosh, we're going to have this throughout all these streets. We know what our problems are if we do one street, and then we can project forward in next years if we want to, future years if we want to do multiple projects. I just like the idea of getting that intelligence now at the lower cost.
And Fillmore is all blocks from A1A to Ridgewood or to the beach crossover? Is that what Fillmore is?
The project would be when it's bid, but the portion that can be CRA funded is only to Ridgewood. The rest of it has to be funded elsewise.
So the 300,000 is to,
Put towards design engineering for Fillmore.
to approve 300,000 for design and engineering. So they will design and engineer all of the blocks west of Ridgewood Avenue to the east of A1A?
Yes, and community outreach engagement with the citizens and residents out there too.
Okay, so from that, we will know, we can say, we will be able to know the difference between the 200 block, the 300 block, and the 400 block?
Yeah, and I think to your point, we do need to also fund separately that portion from Ridgewood East. Not CRA funded for the design.
I
be
think
careful,
we
yeah.
have to, yes. Okay, I think that sounds good. I am all for Fillmore Avenue. I just want to, so no debate for Fillmore, and more importantly, to positively impact Fillmore. It might be that Johnson is better, but my only concern is where can we differentiate, but why it's Fillmore? I'm convinced from, everything I'm seeing and the recommendations we've received that it is the best option, and knowing which block to focus on first is great. So that's it for me. Any other comments on this one?
I have one question about the area in the map that we were looking at that is part of the Civic Hub, and you're saying Fillmore from A1A to Ridgewood. So will that part, the engineering, be included as well in this study, or in the engineering?
Yeah, the 300,000 would be from A1A to Ridgewood.
Okay, with this in mind? Or without this being considered?
No, it would be a standalone project if we.
Okay.
Two separate things, but if we did them at the same time and we gave them both to Kimley Horn, they would say, well, let's combine this effort.
Okay, that's why I wanted to understand that, because that block, we're still getting data on.
Yeah.
By the Civic Hub area. And so I wanted to understand how the engineering would work for that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question. In what's Kimley Horn would be looking at on Fillmore, would it be safe to look at any historical construction, any historical data on the other presidential streets? Would what they find on Fillmore be a mirror on the other streets?
I would think so, but you can't guarantee it.
Right, okay.
But we do know that presidential streets area was a stormwater, the basin system was built at one time, for example, and sewer mains, for example, were run at one time. Laterals might have been done later, but the big pipes for stormwater, wastewater were all done at that time. But there have been other things that happen, City Cocoa comes in at a time and does a force main, and then other directional borings take place, and maybe the gas line comes in later.
So it's possible that it could be a baseline at least?
Yeah, it's a good baseline document, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? City manager, anything else?
No, do we want to take any action on item 3B?
I think Thursday,
Okay.
we can get consensus if that's appropriate there. I'm going to feel a lot better, but
We
For
can't
me.
act as a CRA board on Thursday, though, is the thing.
It's for council.
okay, I don't think we should take
Isn't this action for council?
These are CRA expenditures.
Do we have a proposal?
No, but we would get a proposal. That would be the thing. We could get a proposal. You could give direction to get the proposal.
That's why I felt, I didn't know what we were, I know the general scope. If we can get a proposal, but I would approve getting the proposal back.
For both
and-
items 3A and 3B?
Yeah. Well, I think there's I'm really talking about the Fillmore Avenue. I don't want them to put their efforts into designing the other parts of the Civic Hub area that's not related to. Yeah, I think if it's just to request a proposal, sure, for both of them.
Okay, then that can be by consensus. The staff will return with Kimley Horn proposals for both of them. for
And I'd be
information.
willing to meet as fast as possible, not wait till the next CRA meeting to take action so we don't slow you down.
Very helpful, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Council or board, we're okay?
Yep.
Okay. Look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion by Board Member Willis, a second by Vice Chair Callum to adjourn. Okay. City Clerk?
Board Member Davis? 4. Board Member Jackson?
4.
Vice Chair Kellum?
4.
Chair Morrison?
4.
Board Member Willis?
4.
Meeting adjourned.